Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so very much for dropping by this video. To anyone who's new to this channel is dedicated to helping people understand the difference between authentic non-duality and pseudo non-duality, often called Neo-Advaita. I call it what it is, bullshit, fake non-duality. A warm welcome. So I sometimes ask myself, why do I keep making all these videos? Why do I do it? I not so much question, but I inquire. What's my motive? And I'll give you my answer this morning. I met someone who had found my channel. They found my channel maybe a year and a half before I met them personally. And they were lost and crazy and didn't know what to do, didn't know what was going on. They'd been heavily involved in Neo-Advaita. And they found my channel. And it was very helpful to them. And I'm grateful. I'm unspeakably grateful to hear that. And I do hear that sometimes. But what she told me, how it was helpful. Once I heard that, I knew I could never stop doing this channel, so far as I can tell, or doing this work, as long as I got breath in my lungs, and as long as there's one Neo-Advaita teacher on the planet or one person who believes Neo-Advaita. So what this person said is they were so lost and confused, and they didn't even know what was going on. I'll give you an example, and I've shared this before. These are the kind of thoughts that were going through her head. I am suffering so much. That was her sort of, you could say, authentic voice. And then the Neo-Advaita thoughts would come and would say to her, well, if you just realize there is no you, then you wouldn't suffer anymore. She'd say, but I've tried that. It doesn't work. I'm suffering so bad. I need help. The Neo-Advaita thoughts would come. You don't need any help. You just need to realize that you don't exist. The part of you that thinks you need help is an illusion. If you just see through that, everything will be fine. But I've tried that. I'm suffering. The Neo-Advaita voice. Well, who is it who's suffering? Just inquire into that and all your problems will vanish. And on and on and on. She was trapped in what I call the Neo-Advaita mind maze. Once you've gone to a certain extent, by you, I mean we, anyone, once a person has gone down the rabbit hole of Neo-Advaita to a certain depth, it's very hard to get out. Very hard. Because of this weird mind loop. Because of the addictive, dissociative high that comes from self-inquiry, that comes from thinking Neo-Advaita thoughts. It gives you a temporary high. And it is dissociative and it is addictive. And I've talked about that a lot. So this person was just trapped in this loop. They found my channel. And then what she said to me is, until I found your channel, I didn't even know Neo-Advaita was a thing. So this person was trapped in a mind loop and they didn't even have a word or a concept for what it is that they were dealing with. They knew they were suffering. They knew they needed help, but they didn't even know what they needed help from. And I am unspeakably happy that I could offer assistance. Unspeakably happy that the hell and misery I went through And the insights that I've had clawing my way out of hell, out of Neo-Advaita brainwashing, was able to be helpful to one other person. Someone came on during one of my lives, and they were pretty new to Neo-Advaita, and they said, well, what is Neo-Advaita? And I gave a very concise definition, and I shared why it's harmful, very brief. And this person said, oh, that makes sense. Every time I practice Neo-Advaita, I start to feel depressed. I'm going to stop. So I helped catch someone before they got too far down the rabbit hole. And that brings an unspeakable joy that I could have a small part in sparing someone from the hell I went through. So a lot of what I talk about on this channel is theoretical, and you could say philosophical, intellectual. The reason is because I share what helped me get out. I'm not saying it's the only way, but what helped me get out is to recognize that what Neo-Advaita teachers are teaching is contradictory. It's different from what Ramana Maharshi taught, Adi Shankara taught, and the three principal texts of Advaita Vedanta, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, but even more so, you could say the essential text of Advaita Vedanta is called the Jewel Crescent of Discrimination by Adi Shankara. And Ramana Maharshi said that it contains the direct path to non-dual realization, and that anyone who wants to experience non-dual realization must understand what's taught in that book. It's called, again, the Crescent Jewel of Discrimination by Adi Shankara. And so what is taught in that book, much less what Ramana Maharshi actually taught, much less what's in Adi Shankara and his other texts taught, much less what's in the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, is opposite of what Neo-Advaita teaches. Neo-Advaita borrows some language, but then twists the message into something new. That's what helped me out, because the mind maze of Neo-Advaita for me was believing that Neo-Advaita was true and was the absolute truth. The other part of it was, as I've said, Neo-Advaita is addictive. So not only was it addictive, but I thought the very thing that was addictive was the absolute truth that would lead me to freedom. Now, someone who abuses alcohol or abuses drugs or food or pornography, who's like really addicted to these things, they know it's bad and harmful, but they're caught in a loop where their willpower is not sufficient to get them to stop. That's one definition of addiction, a compulsive behavior that willpower is not sufficient to stop. But in those particular addictions, people know it's bad, but they do it anyway. What makes Neo-Advaita so tricky is that not only is it addictive, and like all addictions harmful, not only is Neo-Advaita an addiction, but it's been taught and then believed that it's the absolute truth, that it's the highest truth, that it will lead to liberation. So there's no motivation to leave it. Someone who's abusing alcohol or drugs or another addictive behavior, there's motivation to leave it. There's a desire to leave it because they know it's bad. Neo-Advaita, people, and that me and other people in it, become convinced it's the absolute truth. And it will lead to liberation, to an end of suffering, to eternal happiness, to eternal peace. Got a little passionate there, like banged my computer. So why would anyone want to leave that? And then there's other aspects. There becomes a social aspect of, like, there's the Neo-Advaita community. Some people have a direct and personal relationship with a Neo-Advaita teacher, their drug dealer, who will do everything, play all sorts of manipulative games to keep people involved, as will the other members of the community. See, Neo-Advaita is, so one of the reasons that addictive behavior is so enticing is because it gives you a short-term solution. It gets rid of the pain temporarily, and then you don't have to do anything else. Like, let's say your life is falling apart, and then you get drunk. Well, you don't have to deal with the pain. The pain goes away temporarily, and you don't have to do anything. You just lay around and be drunk. And then you wake up the next day, and you're feeling awful. Your life is awful. And then you deal with it by getting drunk. So that's just how Neo-Advaita works. You get this temporary high, and then a crash comes. And so to deal with the crash, you practice self-inquiry, or you go to satsang, or you listen to a Neo-Advaita lecture, and you get high again. And then you crash. And this goes on and on for a while. And then your life slowly starts going downhill. And you feel yucky about your life going downhill because you stop dealing with your life. That's what addiction does. All you start to care about is the addiction. And then, but that's painful to watch your life and yourself head downhill. And so what do? You turn to the addictive behavior. And by you, I mean we. The proverbial you. I'm not trying to sit up here and lecture or preach. So it just becomes this vicious cycle. And Neo-Advaita has the, on top of all of this, says, and by the way, this is the highest spiritual path. So you're going to shit, your life is going to shit, but you're convinced, like, oh, I'm headed towards enlightenment. Someone's life who's falling apart and who has an addiction, they don't have the delusion that they're headed towards enlightenment. They know that they're headed downhill. But Neo-Advaita convinces you you're headed uphill when you're actually headed downhill. That's why I say it's demonic, because it is an intense form of illusion. It's a life-destroying form of illusion. So that's all. I think that's all I have for today. Unless anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to type them in. All right, beautiful souls. I wish you a great day. Thank you so much for taking some time to reflect on these topics. Big love.